Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's edition of The Great Movies, a discussion of another round from 2020. See, we don't always talk about old movies here. And before we get to that discussion, my name is Andy Wolverton, and I'm delighted to be joined tonight by another partner in crime, Colin Chappell. So thank you, Colin, for filling in while Darnice is away. Colin and I are both librarians in the Anne Arundel County, Maryland Public Library System, which sponsors this program. So our next regular virtual meeting will be on Friday, March the 4th at 7 p.m. Eastern, when we will discuss Life Itself, the life of Roger Ebert, a documentary from 2018. Ebert's name invariably comes up in just about every discussion we've had, and I thought it would be nice to watch and discuss this documentary. Hard to watch at times, but definitely worth the effort. So you can start signing up for that discussion on February the 18th. I'm going to put that link into the chat right now. And there it is. Okay, and don't forget, we'll have another film to discuss this month, a special discussion of Black Orpheus from 1959 on February the 25th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Darnice will be leading this discussion, and I'm putting the link for that event into the chat as well. And there you have it. Okay. So if you are new to our discussions, we are so glad to have you along. And if you would like to join our email list, please send me an email at awolverton@aacpl.net. There we go. That's in the chat as well. That way you'll get all of the news about our upcoming programs before anybody else. Okay. Also, please know that we want as many people participating as possible tonight. So if you have a question or a comment, please raise your real hand or your virtual hand, or you can use the chat feature, and Colin will work you into the conversation. We also ask that you please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. So a big thank you to everyone who nominated a movie for our summer audience choice events. What I'll do is take all of those nominations and run them by our Canopy representative to make sure they will actually be showing during the summer months, so we don't have any accidents going on. Then I'll put together a ballot of all the films that will still be available during June, July, and August. Plus, as I mentioned last time, I hope to have some additional discussions as well, hoping that we'll have 2 movies a month to watch and discuss this summer. Okay, I think that is it for my announcements. Does anybody have any questions about any of that stuff? Okay, great. All right, so let us jump in to another round. Well, I'll tell you, first of all, this was a week at the library where I wanted so badly to try the experiment these guys did, but I didn't do it.
Amen.
I wanted to do it. Colin, did you want to do it?
Yes, you almost
wanted to do it. Yeah, it was just one of those weeks. So the film starts with a quote from the Danish philosopher Soren Kierkegaard. What is youth? A dream. What is love? The content of the dream. An appropriate way to begin the film, which starts with teams of teenagers running a race while trying to down cases of beer. These students attend a gymnasium school, which is essentially a secondary school preparing students for entrance into a university. But the film primarily focuses on 4 teachers: Martin, a history teacher; Peter, a music instructor; Nikolai, a psychology teacher; and Tommy, a coach. Things are not going well for any of these guys, but the film's particular focus is on Martin, who's having a midlife crisis, including troubles at home. He asks his wife, Annika, "Have I become boring?" Her answer, "You're not the same Martin I first met." Things aren't any better at school, where Martin faces a room full of students and their parents claiming that his teaching is a barrier to the kids' success. Then Nikolai suggests the 4 teachers conduct an experiment based on a theory by a Norwegian psychiatrist who believes humans have a normal blood alcohol content level that's too low. 1 or 2 drinks a day, and we're going to restore the balance, and everything will be wonderful. So let's try it. And they do. And things go well for a while. Now, I know a lot of you like to do your own research, and that's great. So you may know that the film's director and co-writer, Thomas Vinterberg, experienced a personal tragedy while working on this project. Vinterberg's daughter, who convinced him to make the film in the first place, died in a car accident 4 days into the filming. To honor his daughter, Vinterberg worked to make the film more life-affirming. Now, we'll definitely talk about the film's famous final scene, but before we get there, we have to establish a couple of things. First, I found several studies and articles that confirm that heavy drinking in Denmark is very common, and that the country has some of the highest rates of teenage drinking in the world. Second, a few people contacted me saying that they have experienced the devastating effects of alcohol on families firsthand, and were concerned that the film might make light of this problem. My own father was an alcoholic for many years, so I completely understand how they might feel. But I think there are several important social and artistic aspects of Another Round that will make for a good discussion tonight. So, first of all, your general impressions of the film. Let's see what you thought. Who is first?
Bill, I see you.
Okay, Bill?
Well, I didn't care for the film too much. I guess the storyline was, to me, just some of what you just said. The fact that these kids, so many of them were really into drinking. It was so clear from right from the beginning with the race, with them on the train, handcuffing the conductor who was trying to kind of slow them down a little bit. And then these guys who think they have to drink to be able to improve themselves. I mean, the whole thing was just sad to me. And of course, culminating with Thomas's death at the end. I mean, while they may have shown some improvement at first, they couldn't control it. They continued to escalate the whole thing. And I don't know, I just didn't really enjoy the movie at all. The only thing that was kind of remotely entertaining was the first time Martin goes into the teacher's lounge after he's been drinking, and he does this thing where he's doing spins trying to avoid people and everything. And you think he's finally gotten out of the room, and then he smacks his face into the door frame. Other than that, I find a hard time enjoying the movie at all.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks, Bill. And Colin, who's next?
I saw Jeff's hand up next, and then Susan.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Upon first viewing of this, I had it in my head that I would call this a 5-star movie. Like it really made a big impression on me at first watch. After 24 hours, I started to kind of process a little more. I probably knock it back a bit from that, but I still enjoyed this very much. First of all, I thought the performances of the 4 guys, the 4 teachers, were across the board just amazing, like just so true to life and so honest. And I like the idea that they took this concept on of using alcohol or drugs. You could just as easily say drugs to help grease the wheels of creative concepts. And like history is littered with writers, musicians, painters, whatever, who felt that they needed that help to unleash their creative juices. So I appreciated that this was taking that on. Where it started to lose me, I thought, was when the guys start escalating. Like I thought these guys are intelligent guys. I wasn't sure that, drinking yourself to the point where you're taking your clothes off in a bar and dancing on a table. I don't know what they thought that was going to accomplish. But I did think it's not enough for me to disregard the movie, but I did think it flagged a bit when they got that far. Again, I thought the performances were great. The first scene in the birthday party in the restaurant, I thought was just masterful. especially Martin, because you can see he's got issues in his life, but he's very consciously, he was quiet there. He was self-processing, he was inside himself. He didn't really want to talk about stuff. And when they get him to take the drink of vodka, you can almost see the like this mask come down, and you can see that he's got a deep melancholy, and that's when he starts to talk about stuff. So I love that scene. I love those four guys, and just a really really terrific movie, I thought.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. I think you're right about the performance of Mads Mikkelsen in that scene is just tremendous. Everything is really on his face, facial expressions, and we know at least somewhat what he might be going through. Yeah. And I think Colin, was Susan next?
Susan was next, and then John, and I think Bill has something to do there. So, Susan, go ahead.
Okay. Susan, are you with us? Okay.
Yeah, I'm on my phone, and I'm not sure how to use Zoom with a phone, but I'm giving it a try.
You're doing fine.
Well, I actually love this movie. I watched it 3 times just to pick up the things that I didn't pick up the first time. Sometimes with Danish, since I don't speak Danish, I get a little lost in the subtitles. So I like to watch it over. Made me totally grateful that my great-great-grandfather left Copenhagen in 1852 for America. But when I looked at the faces of these 4 guys, I basically saw defeat. And at first, the drinking really put me off. Of course, like most people in their younger days, I probably did my share. And now I'm older, it's, I can't tolerate it. But you could kind of see, it's like it was a ceremony for them, the drinking. It wasn't really just getting drunk. It was the fellowship, the different liquors that they had, the mixtures, the wine. And in spite of all that off-putting of the alcohol, I thought the ending was the dancing, and just came out of nowhere for me. It was glorious. But I understand that these guys are all going to pay the price for, that alcohol is going to pretty much ruin any personal relationships they have. But I really loved the movie. It really stayed with me.
Thank you, Susan. And we are going to talk about that final scene, possibly in detail a little bit later on. But let's continue. Who was next, Colin?
John is up next.
My starting point is almost the opposite of Jeff's, in the sense that I felt very disoriented when I first started watching it, and I was a little bit put off by that. But I came to have a better appreciation for it, although I probably end up around the same place as he does in terms of how many stars to give it. But I think one of the things that struck me about it, there were several, was the quote from Kierkegaard at the beginning and how that played out in the movie. And I think one of the things, I don't know Vinterberg at all. I never heard of him before. Advertising my ignorance. He's apparently a world-class director. I did know about Lars von Trier. I saw Dancing in the Dark on the big screen, and it literally made me sick to watch it. And that was my experience with that movement. And I never looked at anything by Vinterberg, but I think he's trying to negotiate, if that's the right word, or at least operate somewhere between a dream and reality. And for a while, I think what you're seeing is the dream being actualized. And partly that was confirmed to me when they play that piece by Klaus Herford, whom I had never heard of before. It's a beautiful piece. It's a fantasy by Schubert. And so I thought that was a very subtle way of underscoring this dream theme in a way. And to me, one of the really touching and moving examples of the dream is when Specs scores the goal in the soccer match. It's not clear at all to me what if, how Tommy's coaching turned him into that shot that he made was a good shot. I mean, I watch soccer a lot. I'm really into it, and that shot he made was a very fine shot for a kid who's supposed to be this, Danish version of the 90-pound weakling. I was really struck by that. So I think it was a very interesting movie. I haven't watched it 3 times, but I probably would need to watch it 3 times to really get what it's trying to, or what it is doing. But I'm really glad that you put it out there, Andy, because I never, ever, ever would have watched that movie otherwise. It just would never have crossed my radar. So I appreciate that. And as a result of that, I'm more interested. I do like Scandinavian films, but probably my fondness for them ends at around Ingmar Bergman. That's about as far as I get, to be quite honest.
All right, thank you, John. Outstanding comments, and I really like what you said about the fantasy versus reality playing out in the film. I think you really have something there.
Let's go to Bill. Bill, you had your hand up a minute ago, and then we'll go to Chuck.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. I really like this film a lot. I agree with a lot of the statements that have been already made. Beautifully acted and directed. I was, before this movie, I was not familiar with Vinterberg, but after doing some reading on him, I'd really like to see more of his work. And I had no idea that I'd seen so much of Mads Mikkelsen, Casino Royale, Doctor Strange, and all of these villainous roles that he's played. And he has this remarkable presence and this ability to, with very little movement in his face, be able to put forth all kinds of different emotions. I could see, particularly in some of his earlier work, that he could give a cold smile that would make your blood run cold, but at the same time look very vulnerable in a scene that was right after that. One of the things that really struck me about this film was the ambiguity in it, the ambivalence that Vinterberg seemed to have with the whole dynamic of drinking and what that meant, what that brought to an individual or a group. Obviously, as Andy pointed out earlier, there's a lot of Scandinavian countries, Denmark, and of course Russia, even Scotland and Ireland, where there's a true drinking culture. And it's almost like he's trying to play this all out and come to some conclusions in his own mind about the advantages and disadvantages of it. I think particularly the ending, it was really interesting where he took it in terms of he had already showed that these characters seemed to really blossom when they were at that 0.05% blood alcohol content. But of course, they took it way beyond that and blew it. And you could see that coming a mile away, that they were going to self-destruct on it. But the way he went into that ending, and particularly the triumphal nature of that last scene and the last shot where Martin leaps out over the ocean, and it's almost like he's suspended, and you could see it really going either way. You could make a case that he got it, that it was the alcohol that kind of was the catalyst to free him up to do all of these great things with his class and reconnect with his family, etc. And yet knowing that he could go over the edge into self-destruction. But I think you could also make a case that this is a fool's errand, that it's all just going to dissipate immediately after that insanely cool dance that he did at the end. I was reading that Mickelson started out as a gymnast and a dancer, and you could really tell that from that last bit of choreography that he did. I just thought it was a really rich film in the way it looked at all of these aspects. I remember reading something, and there's a Homer Simpson quote that kind of sums it up. Alcohol is the cause of and solution to all life's problems. And it's like, I don't know, that sort of nails it for me. There was a certain Dead Poets Society kind of element to this, and yet there was all of that destruction that could happen as a result of the overuse of alcohol or drugs or any of these things. But again, that the ambivalence that the director brought to this, like, again, we have that Kierkegaard quote at the beginning, but that you've also got that middle piece where the student is trying to, takes a swig of alcohol and is meeting to pass his test for getting into college, and he's talking about Kierkegaard, and he goes, well, Kierkegaard, the whole meaning of this anxiety thing that he was going through is that it was important for people to appreciate and accept their own fallibility in order to enjoy life. So I just thought it was a really interesting take, and it made me want to see more of this particular director.
Okay. Yeah, me too. Okay, who do we have, Colin?
Chuck is up next.
Okay, Chuck.
Yeah, I really like the film primarily due to the performance of Mads Mikkelsen. I really found his character Martin very compelling and relatable, and I really liked the way his character kind of evolved throughout the entire film and how he processed everything he was dealing with. And I really like one aspect I really like is how they planted in the beginning his dancing ability through those jazz ballet classes he had took, and then that slowly builds, and then at the end you have the payoff. So I really liked how they worked that in there. And then from a technical standpoint, I really like kind of some of the things they do with the camera, especially when Martin is first, drinking to improve his performance in the class, and the kind of the camera has like a little bit of motion, kind of like if you had a couple of drinks yourself. How you kind of view things. So I thought they did a lot of good things with that as well. And overall, I would say it was a film I enjoyed and would see again.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chuck.
Jen.
I'm very mixed on this film, and I'll tell you why. I mean, on the positive side, I thought it was a very good male bonding. The four characters, as others have mentioned, in particular the lead, were very well drawn and very well acted. We haven't mentioned too much, but the two wives I thought were very good also, and very appropriate in their responses to this. So I really like that. As I'm also watching it now, I don't know how in Denmark the people reacted to it. I'm not so sure it would have gotten made easily in the US. We tend to be so politically correct. I don't think a film like this, if it did get made, it would have had a lot of negative press and a lot of, advocates for Alcoholics Anonymous and recovery programs and all that. I think there'd be a whole lot of associated noise going on about this movie. So in some respects, it's a foreign movie. I understand it won an Oscar for Best Foreign, if I got that right. So that's where I'm mixed. Where I got into trouble with it, though, was So they're drinking, they're enjoying it, everything's going good, but now they're going to take it to the next level. And of course, this is going to go bad. And I'm watching it as they're getting drunk in the bar and dancing on the bar. I go, did none of these guys go through this in college? I mean, that looked like a college extraordinaire experience. None of them in their middle age experienced this before to know this isn't going to turn out well. But then my last comment where I really had trouble with the film is when the teacher urged the pupil to drink before his exam. I mean, it's a form of, something's not right, even though I mentioned about political correctness. There's something really wrong there, and that bothered me.
Yeah.
So, very mixed.
Okay.
Thank
you, Jan. I'm sorry, I was just a really brief comment. Great points. And as Ethan, I believe, has already put into the chat, there is an American version of this coming out starring Leonardo DiCaprio, for what that's worth. It'll be interesting to see how that film differs from the one we just saw. Okay. Sorry, Colin, who we have next?
Jacqueline has her hand raised. Then I see Jim. We'll get Jim next. And Sue as well. We'll get you.
So I don't have much to add. I kind of agree with Jan. I'm a bit mixed on it for some of the reasons that she said. I do have 2 points. I want to second John Kuntz's point about the music. I did think it was very appropriate for the film. And Andy, I got to say, way better than that other Scandinavian film, We Are the Best. The music, strictly the music. The other thing I would say, though, is that the lead, Mads, reminds me of a younger Christopher Walken. He can dance, too, and he has that look about him, that moody look. So that's the only thing I was going to mention.
Great. Christopher Walken, that's a great connection. I certainly didn't make it, but it's a good one.
Jim and then Sue.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that, well, for my impressions generally aligned with Jan's, but I felt that in the early times of the 4 guys getting together and looking at what their lives were then, I thought that all of them not only were boring in teaching class, they were bored themselves too. And this experience gave them reasons to get together and to alleviate their boredom. And I think part of the drinking thing was, oh, I'm bored, so let's get rid of that by wasting ourselves.
Okay, yeah.
Sue.
I agree with a number of things people have said, like Jeff and Bill. I mean, there's some beautiful things in this film. I also agree with the ambivalence. But I also agree with Jan. And I will tell you that after 20 minutes into this film, I couldn't take it. I knew where they were going, and I just remembered so many people who I know in college usually who decided to drink, and that was the end of their life, basically, because it destroyed them. And it was so gut-wrenching that I had to take 2 days off to come back to it. It's very sad for me. And I think, okay, well, did anybody think about those 2 boys of Matt Madsen's kids? What happened to them? Because there's a lot of fallout, and in some levels, what happened there was not, to me, realistic. On the other hand, it was really interesting to see how ambivalent people's perspective on alcohol was. I mean, good, bad. In the last scene, of course, I guess they weren't going to be drinking more, but there they were drinking more. So it sort of reinforces the problem that they have in Denmark. But I want to say, everything you said about Mad Madsen, I agree with. But I'm watching him and I'm thinking, man, this guy could play Hamlet. Oh, the Prince of Denmark. and then he's just, he does this amazing thing. And I think, then I came up with, I know why they did this film. Just cut through all this. They did this because this guy was voted the sexiest man in Denmark. They just did it so everybody can look at Mad Madsen and then see him dance. Because that was a performance. Anyway, I managed to make it through, and I wish there was a little bit more of a point, but it was very entertaining.
Okay. All right. I see a lot of hands up. Colin is busy tonight.
Yeah, indeed. John had his hand up next.
I just want to pick up on something that Jan said about it being a foreign film. Back in the day when I was much younger, foreign movies were notorious for dealing with subjects that American motion pictures were not either able or willing to deal with, primarily sex. And there used to be articles, chiefly in Playboy, as I recall, showing scenes that were cut out of movies in America, but that were included in foreign releases. It was the same film, but a little more explicit. That started to change, of course. But it does seem to me that it might be the case that foreign films can deal with subjects not necessarily in and of themselves difficult for Americans. I mean, alcoholism is a theme, like The Lost Weekend, I think won Academy Awards, Billy Wilder's film. So it goes back at least that far. But in a way that is perhaps not amenable to American mores. And I think that was one of the things about it that probably disoriented me a little bit, was the fact that the way this was being treated was something that I just was not entirely comfortable or familiar with. And that might be what the role of the foreign film is in America, is to take these ideas, these themes, and expose us to them in a way that we otherwise wouldn't be exposed to. That could be good or bad, but I do think that could possibly be one of the main things that they do. They don't really conform exactly. That's why they have to do remakes, because they see things a little bit differently than Americans do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And again, it will be interesting to see what the American version looks like now that we have seen this one. Okay, Colin, do we have
Martha and Bill?
Okay.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for all your comments. I can appreciate this film on an artistic level. I thought the acting was great. I thought the music was very good. I thought the cinematography was phenomenal. I cannot be comfortable with the way alcoholism was normalized, because a tenth of the population is wired such that when they start to drink, they can't stop. And that's a fact. It's everywhere in the world. And yeah, it's a problem in Denmark because it seems to be encouraged. But the outcomes are always bad. And the ending of this film, where you have something tragic happen, but then it seems like everybody's shifting to that was okay. And that wasn't okay. Men in particular, middle-aged men in particular, use alcohol as a treatment for depression. All four of these guys were clinically depressed. That's why their lives were in the pattern that they were in. And to hint that alcohol is the way out of that is very dangerous. I found when I was done with this movie, I felt it was giving us a dangerous message.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Bill.
Susan had her hand up again. Susan?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of tag on to that last comment, which I thought was really good, is that there were no consequences to any of the drinking in the Danish society. I mean, the first thing you notice is all these high school kids in front of everybody getting totally smashed, and nobody says anything about them handcuffing people to subway cars or disrupting, a whole train full of people. And it's the same thing with the main characters, is until the wife leaves him, there's really no consequences to any of them. They just go about their lives. And I think that I agree that there's the sad part at the end where the PE teacher, takes the boat out with his dog, his poor dog that can't even go out and pee by himself. And, obviously that character is suicidal the whole movie. And it's just a matter of time. You can tell the way he lives in his apartment, the way his friends try to take care of him and look out for him, and it's like futile. I knew a fella when I was working years ago and I think in this country, maybe 40 years ago, drinking was sort of accepted kind of like that. I don't think it is anymore. Anyway, this guy was a really nice fella, but obviously had a drinking problem, and eventually ended up, doing away with himself. And it's disturbing. We all know that's, I think, we're all having a real problem with it. But I hope we talk at the end about other movies about alcoholism, because there's some really good ones that are American movies and that are handled pretty realistically.
You can count on it. We are going to talk about those. Definitely. Colin, I thought I saw Bill Schneider's hand, and then I wanted to ask the group something after Bill, unless there's somebody else after Bill.
I don't see anybody else.
Okay.
Well, I was reading some reviews of the movie, and one reviewer was talking about the philosopher who proposed the theory that we're 0.05% low. And apparently they went on then to refute their own theory. And they put it out there apparently as something that they thought was something, to discuss. And then in the end, they decided that, well, it wasn't true. So, maybe there's some truth to that. The other thing that we were talking about at the end, a little bit about the end of the movie, and it seemed like things were starting to come back together for Martin, and maybe his wife was going to get back with him and everything. And then they start all that drinking again. And I'm thinking to myself, he's blowing it here. And so it seemed like a joyous ending. I'm not really sure whether it was joyous or not. It seemed to me like he was blowing the whole thing, and he was going to end up losing his bike really for good, and that would be the end. So
yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about that ending. And Jeff, I see your hand too. But I want to preface this question with a little bit of information. We see that dance is supposed to be transforming for Martin, because his character feels so weighed down during the majority of the film. I mean, he can't open up and unburden himself to his family, his students, or really even his friends. I mean, they don't have the full story. But by the end of the film, I mean, he's almost weightless, and it's a joyous and celebratory scene that we see there. Actually, this is one of my favorite endings from any movie from the past 10 years, although it's not, I still have some issues with it. And as we talked about, Mikkelsen was trained as a gymnast and a dancer, and danced professionally before he became an actor. But some critics see this final scene as a liberating moment for Martin, and others see it as a continuation of a bigger problem. The film, if you'll think about it, the film ends as it began, with student drinking. So does this ending mean that these students are training to become like the adults that populate this film? Is this a continuous cycle that can't be broken? Or should we see this as a celebratory moment? So let's talk about the ending. And Jeff, I don't know if your comment had to do with the ending. Okay.
My take on the ending is that is a fantasy. That's how I read that. And the reason I think that is because what's the traditional drunk self-image? The drunk thinks he's like the old saying 10 feet tall and bulletproof. That's what I think's going on there. Like, I don't think that like that their lives are all back together. That's just my read on it. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I'd like to hear what people say on that. I want to go back to something Jan was talking about with, I think it was Peter, the guy that gives the kid the drink when he's struggling with his exam. What struck me in that scene was that he's very hesitant. Like I think he just throws that out at the last minute as an option. He was very hesitant to do that, and I think that was maybe just a bit the first bit of self-reflection for these guys, because he just the kid is just panicking, and I think he just seizes on that as maybe this will help you. I don't think it was like him, I'm going to get this kid hooked. I just think, oh, well, here's a crutch for you. Try this. Maybe this will help you. I don't think that was. I don't think that was malicious. I think that was just maybe that's what his mind went to. Like, because that was my experience. So here, try this. I think it was just desperation.
Okay. Yeah, Colin, I see a bunch of hands. Who's
There are a
next?
lot of hands. I know Jim's got his hand up. We'll get to Chuck next, and then Jim and Ethan, you all have your hands up. Chuck.
Yeah, for me, the way I view the final scene is Martin as a character getting to the point where he has let go and had that release, like you said, because there's several opportunities in the film where he's asked to dance and he will not do the dance. So by the time the film has come to an end, he has gotten, his friend has died, Tommy, but he's also had a moment of hopefulness of possibly reconnecting with his wife. So I think the character has gotten to that point where he feels like he can release. And finally, the buildup of seeing him dance is, culminating in that final scene. That's just my take on it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Jim, and then Ethan.
Yeah, I'm going to try something here. Good. Yes. I'm going to try to show my other screens here. Yeah, there it's somewhat showing up. I have a short cord letting me do this, but so I can see. This was in Sweden in 2004, and you see the high school seniors who had just graduated riding on a truck and then going down to a boat to party. And so that's all old hat there. The stuff for the final scene is a Scandinavian tradition.
Okay.
Yeah, my cousin lives in Stockholm and told me that's what that was all about. So.
Wow. All right. Thank you.
Ethan, did you want to get in there? Looks like you're muted. We're having some difficulty. So let's see.
Yeah, still muted,
Yeah.
Ethan.
Let's see.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know, Ethan, would it be worth logging out and logging back in, perhaps?
Maybe.
Oh,
You hear me now?
Oh, there you go. That's
good.
great.
Yeah, good.
It's weird. All right. The thing that I was gonna say was basically already said word for word, so I don't want to repeat it. But I will say that I remember from last discussion, I was, I believe, the only one who, besides Andy, who had already seen this before. And I just wanted to say that I really liked it back then, but I liked it just a little bit more this time around. I think it's very, very powerful.
Great. Thank you.
Jacqueline, and then Jan.
I just wanted to second what Jim had showed. The Roosevarian, it's for all the Scandi countries. They're about 18 when this happens, which is a legal age to drink anyway, and it's only for like a month. When they finish their exams. Did you notice the hats that they all wear at the end? That's a significant portion of it. It is a coming of age, and everybody in the whole country knows this is what's going to happen. They rent buses, they do up vans, they go on boats, and they generally make mischief, but it's only for a month. and then they all go to college. So I think that's part of the Scandi culture. I'm not sure everybody was getting, and that's why the conductor is so tolerant when they're putting on the handcuffs and making mischief. Right? Mm-hmm. It's a different culture, I'm certainly not making any judgment on it. It is more tolerant of drinking because, of course, they have winter. So it's a thought. It's different, but it's certainly not as extreme as some of. I mean, it's certainly as extreme as some of the coming of age rituals and the college hazing rituals that we do here. And if people die there, it's usually by accident, but rarely.
Good. No, it's great to get these perspectives. Thank you.
Jen.
Well, as far as it being, the culture, it was some of the culture in Western New York back in the day for me too. So, I had no problem with the kids in the beginning, the opening scene, doing that, and the bus at the end, because that's what kids do. And yes, is it wrong? It's better they're on a bus than driving in a car. So I was okay with all that. As far as the ending, though, when the lead character, he seemed to have this moment of liberation and dancing and then taking a leap into the water. So, yes, you could look at that he was liberated. He was also drunk. I mean, he was drinking a lot at the dinner. They showed him getting the text from his wife, which looked like a great thing. But then he was swinging down from a bottle, too, in the crowd. So was he really liberated or doing it half drunk? That's where I'm mixed on this. That it could be taken as a great, they're at the dinner following the funeral of their best friend, and but it led to drinking, and I don't know. It's not quite the liberating, flight. I don't care what happens that it really is, because he was under the influence. Does that make sense?
It does, but I want to hear what some other people think. Thank you, Jan.
Martha and Bill. You're muted. There you go.
There you go.
So with the scene where Peter is helping the student and giving him alcohol to uninhibit himself, I don't know if you noticed earlier in the movie when the student said that he wanted to go into medicine and he needed a B in that class in order to be able to get into a university to do that. So how would you like it if someone was teaching someone who's going to be operating on you that the best way to be uninhibited is to take a couple of swigs of alcohol before.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
And John had a comment about that scene. John said, shortly before that scene with the student about to take the exam, Peter says he regrets not having had any children. And John thought that was his way of his faltering attempt to play a paternal role in that moment.
Good comment. I kind of saw that scene as he was so desperate for this kid not to fail that he would try anything, even that, to get him to believe in himself. And that brings up another question too. We could say alcohol really wasn't what these guys needed, but what was? Was it confidence? Was it, what did these guys really need?
John, do you have your hand up there?
I don't know how popular this view is going to be, but I think they needed some, which Kierkegaard, by the way, had to an infinite degree, some kind of religious belief. They had no transcendent values in their lives. And so their lives were to some degree depleted by that, I think. They live in a wholly secular society, and there's nothing beyond that they can really aspire to or hope in or anything else. That's just my opinion. But I thought the fact that Kierkegaard was used as a reference point might be a subtle suggestion of that. Anyone who knows Kierkegaard's work, he devoted almost all of it to religious rumination. He's considered a philosopher, the founder of existentialism, but he was, in doing that, he wrote about religious themes and topics almost exclusively.
Yeah, good point. Philosopher and theologian, which a lot of people do forget. Okay, we had others.
Bernadette.
Well, existentialism is about purpose and meaning in life, and I think that's what they were lacking. They didn't really know what their lives meant and what was their purpose there. And I saw that once they got to the point where they will allow themselves to interrelate with people who they could affect their lives with, then they began to feel alive. The sad part, it took them alcohol to get to that point, which it's known. If you rely on alcohol and you become dependent on it, you can easily become abusive of alcohol, and that's where they finally ended up, in an abuse of it, because they felt they couldn't be who they were without it. As far as the end scene, I agree with Jan. Yeah, he was liberated, but he was liberated on alcohol. Is that how you become liberated to sustain a life of meaning and purpose? I don't know. I don't think so.
Interesting. Okay.
Martha and Bill. Bill, do you have something? And then Jan, did you have your hand up?
So I would echo John's sentiment that what they lacked was a moral compass. Maybe they were looking for that, but what they really lacked was self-esteem. And the alcohol allowed them to be uninhibited enough to actually have some of the success that they needed to see that. And then unfortunately went a little too deep into that. And then I'm supposed to ask my wife whether everyone liked the cod fishing scene, because it was perfect.
Okay, was it Jan that was next? Comment?
Jan was up next. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just thinking about what you said, what they lacked, and if it wasn't, take the alcohol out of it, they're middle-aged guys. Were they going through a midlife crisis? What would have jolted them back into taking a look at their life was the death of their friend. Unfortunately, it was brought on by the alcohol, or at least alcohol contributed to it. But myself, having had a friend who passed away somewhat suddenly, it will jolt you into a perspective that, if your life isn't good right now, change it. So I think, in a weird way, without, the alcohol, that might have made an impression in the other three. His death, it was brought on by alcohol, but I took it that it was, middle-aged guys, that their lives hadn't turned out maybe exactly as planned, and they kind of fell into a rut. I mean, that was it. They needed something to jolt them back to an appreciation for what they had, or if it wasn't there, change it at this point going further.
All right. Anyone else? Do we have anybody else?
I don't see anybody. Martha, just to add to your question about the fishing scene, my wife laughed out loud at that scene and said, that's a drunk decision. Thought that was hilarious. Yeah. Bill, did you have your hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, I largely agree with Jan's take on that. I thought it was essentially a midlife crisis buddy movie, and it was alcohol that was just greasing the wheels for what they really wanted to do, which was to liberate themselves out of this middle-aged rut. And as a result of doing it the way they did, like I say, I think Vinterberg had an idea of like really immersing himself in the all of those aspects of both what alcohol meant to that society and what its effects was on individuals. Because I think in the final analysis, I think we would all agree that no, alcohol is not the answer for something like that, for midlife crisis. But that was the catalyst for them getting into all of these machinations. Actually, and somebody brought up earlier that I think his name was Scotterud, who supposedly had this idea of the 0.5% alcohol content, and yet he never really made that assertion. It was a misinterpretation of something that he had written as the introduction to a book. He wasn't trying to assert that that was a true thing. And in so doing, I think the movie itself was kind of saying they kind of just came up with this almost ridiculous notion of having this, oh, well, let's try this grand experiment. And they even went to the point of like, oh, we'll take notes and we'll write a big paper on it. And it's like, what's that all about? But it was their excuse for dealing with essentially that midlife crisis that so many go through.
All right, good point. Very good, Bill. I think too we have to look at one of the things that I touched on a little bit at the beginning, that Vinterberg had this terrible tragedy in his own family and decided to make the film more life affirming at that point. So I wonder perhaps what his original ending was. Maybe part of that celebratory final scene has to do not only with the culture, but with him trying to pull something positive out of all this. I don't know. It would be interesting to learn to see the original script, not in Danish. We couldn't read it, or I couldn't read it. But that would be interesting to find out about that. Okay, well, we were getting pretty close to our end here, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in with some recommendations, and then after that I will open up the floodgates for you guys to give your recommendations, which is always one of my favorite parts of this. So this director we talked about a little bit, Thomas Vinterberg, also worked with Mads Mikkelsen in a movie called The Hunt from 2012. Is there anybody that's seen that movie? Okay, Ethan's seen it. I have not seen it, but it received good reviews and is currently playing on Canopy. I feel like this is probably not the easiest film to watch. Ethan, would you agree, or would you want to tell us a little bit about it without a spoiler-free?
I'll do my best to say without spoilers, but in this movie with the same director and star, Mads plays a kindergarten teacher whose life is thrown into turmoil after a seemingly innocent lie is told. I watched The Hunt immediately after I watched Another Round for the first time, and I was completely blown away. It is phenomenal. It's very much a difficult watch, way more difficult than Another Round was. But I think ultimately the Hunt is the better movie, and I'm very, very impressed specifically with the second half of the movie. If you can make it through the first half, and all that discomfort that it makes you feel, the second half is very, very powerful cinema.
Okay, thanks, Ethan. So maybe we want to watch a couple of comedies in between this and that. All right. Also, one of the first American films to deal seriously with alcoholism, as one that's been brought up already, and that's The Lost Weekend from 1945. And it won a Best Actor Oscar for Ray Milland, which still holds up as an incredible performance. The film's directed by one of my all-time favorite directors, Billy Wilder. It's not on Canopy, but it is on DVD from the library. And I think someone has mentioned this one in the chat. In the film Leaving Las Vegas from 1995, Nicolas Cage plays a man who has lost everything, including his family. He comes to Las Vegas with the intention of literally drinking himself to death. Cage also won a Best Actor Academy Award for his performance. Again, this is not one that's on Canopy, but it is on DVD from the library. And then my final recommendation, speaking of Las Vegas, is a little film out of the ordinary called Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets from 2020. Now, this is a film that's currently on Canopy. This is a documentary about the people who frequent a Las Vegas bar called the Roaring Twenties on the bar's final night before it closes forever. What are these people going to do the next day after the bar has closed? The characters in this film are amazing, and if you watch this film, you'll have a hard time forgetting them. So those are my recommendations. Let's hear what you have.
Dan.
Me?
Yes.
Jack Lemmon and Lee Remick in Days of Wine and Roses. Excellent movie. I think it's Oscar winner. I'm not positive, but I think somebody got an Oscar for it.
Okay, we got some more hands.
Jeff?
Yeah, I put some thought into this actually. We've mentioned the movies that are about alcoholism. I wanted to find a couple that featured characters who were alcoholics, but that it's not necessarily what the movie's about. The two I came up with are David Lean's Hobson's Choice from, I think it's 54 or something like that, with Charles Laughton. He plays a shoe store owner who's kind of a blustery drunk. He manages to go to the pub every night and neglects his family and his business. And his one daughter decides at some point to take things into her own hands and fix things. So just a great performance by Laughton, who is, of course, great in just about everything he ever did. So that's one. The other one is, I think, early 80s with Robert Duvall as an Air Force colonel. It's called The Great Santini, who he plays like a hard-ass colonel who drives his family hard, and but he has his demons. He's plainly an alcoholic. It's referred to, I think, once in the film, but the common thread between those two are two great performances by two of my favorite actors. So Hobson's Choice and The Great Santini, I would recommend.
All right, very good. And we had
who's next? Susan's up next.
Okay, Susan.
Yeah, the one I like that comes to mind is Fat City with Stacy Keach and Susan Tyrrell, who is a totally underrated, great actress who I think she died young and had been in some indie movies, and she plays one of the great barflies of all time.
Susan, I'm so glad you mentioned Fat City, which is one of my favorite films. It's a film by John Huston that most people have never seen. It's got a very young Jeff Bridges. It's got Stacy Keach and Susan Tyrrell, as you just mentioned. Seek this one out. It's a tremendous film. It's also a great novel as well.
John. I think you're...
Pursuing the education theme, a movie that I think is astonishing, rarely hear about it, is The Wild Child by Francois Truffaut, who stars in it himself. He tries to teach a feral child how to be human. It's in black and white and uses a lot of the classic film techniques from the D.W. Griffith era. It's a beautiful film, wonderfully done, beautifully paced and everything else. On the Scandinavia theme, as I said, Ingmar Bergman's about as far as I go, but Smiles of a Summer Night is a really enjoyable, you're going to laugh out loud kind of comedy, brilliantly acted, beautifully done. And also Wild Strawberries with Victor Seastrom, who had a brief period in Hollywood as a director and directed a wonderful silent movie called The Wind with Lillian Gish. So I would recommend all those if you're looking for a Scandinavian theme. There's a lot more, but those were some that stick out with me.
John, I saw Smiles of a Summer Night just last month. and was just blown away by
Yeah,
it. Just tremendous.
It's just beautifully acted, and there's a lot of really complex roles that integrate beautifully. And talking about ensemble acting, as we saw tonight, you get a master class in ensemble acting in Swells of a Summer Night, I think.
Absolutely. Who was next?
Ethan also recommended in the chat Arthur on the comedy end of things with Dudley Moore from 1981.
Okay. Wow, no more recommendations? You guys usually have like, an hour's worth.
Jeff maybe has one more. Jeff?
Okay.
Well, you actually said the title, or Andy, inadvertently, is Barfly with Mickey Rourke and Faye Dunaway, which is probably the least sexiest portrayal of drunkenness and alcoholism ever. It's a version of the life of Charles Bukowski, and it's down in the gutter for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting that some of these, and we talked a little bit about The Lost Weekend. I mean, before that in Hollywood, you would usually see the funny drunk in a film. It would be a very limited thing. It was never an entire film, usually, about a drunk. Pre 1945, and even after 1945 for a while, that was still kind of a taboo subject for American films. But things opened up, as we see. Okay. Any other recommendations for tonight? Okay, John, got one?
I just want to pick up on what you said, Andy. I think the whole Thin Man series was a example of that undercurrent of being in the state that these guys aspire to in Another Round, where they're slightly tipsy throughout the whole thing, and for comic effect.
Yeah, those are great. Those are fun films. A lot of fun. Okay, well, thank you all so much, and a special thank you to Colin for filling in tonight. Great job. And don't forget, on the 25th, we're going to be back to discuss Black Orpheus, and I very much look forward to that. Darnice is going to be leading that, and I will be doing what Colin did tonight, taking your questions and reading the chat and enjoying kind of having the night off, although it's not the night off. Colin worked pretty hard tonight. So thank you again, Colin.
Thank you, Colin.
Right. Everybody take care. Stay safe. Watch some great movies.
Thank you.
And see you next time.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Good night. Bye-bye.